Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Grunfeld, and as chairman of the speakers program, I'd like to welcome you here. These last years, we have witnessed an incredible erosion of civil liberties in the United States, such as policies of no-knock, wiretapping, preventive detention, all of which are flagrant violations of our constitutional rights. It was this concern about the decline of civil rights that motivated former Attorney General Ramsey Clark to write his fascinating and desperately needed book, Crime in America. In it he says, and I quote, "If we are to prevent crime in the midst of increasing anxiety and fear, our greatest need is reverence for life. A humane and generous concern for each individual will do more to soothe and humanize our savage hearts than any police power that man can devise." Recently returned from North Vietnam, Ramsey Clark witnessed atrocities perpetrated on a people whose overwhelming desire is the right to self-determination. A warm and concerned human being, would you welcome Ramsey Clark?
How long am I supposed to talk?
You can speak like approximately 30 or 45 minutes, and then there will be questions and answers from the microphone right here. And we should get out of here about 10:02 or 5:02. And I'll have some hamburgers waiting for you if you're hungry.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good to be here, more or less. Will Rogers used to go around saying he always liked to hear a man talk about himself, because then he knew he wouldn't hear anything bad. I like these introductions for the same reason. You want to say that again? Of course, I know there's about as much reason to rely on them as if I had said it myself. Let me talk with you a little bit about leadership. There's so many of us that are so unconcerned and uninvolved ourselves that we think we can get some guy in there and he'll make the difference, the entire difference. Wave a magic wand and solve all the problems of this troubled land. But it doesn't work that way. It wouldn't even be nice if it did, because we wouldn't know what to do with it. Back in August of 1964, we had a party in Washington for Bob Kennedy. It was the last night that he was Attorney General of the United States, and all the big shots came to tell a guy we really liked goodbye and good luck. And there have been about 29 speeches, I think. Most of the audience was dozing, waiting for Bob to get up and hear what he had to say. When one of those really rare creatures, a quiet man, got up to say his thing. The man was Burke Marshall. You probably haven't heard of him, but that's your loss, I guarantee you. He's so quiet that the first time he met Bob Kennedy to talk to him about signing on at the Department of Justice, the story goes the two of them just sat there for about 90 seconds and nobody said anything. And I think that's probably right. Well, Burke got up. He was the head of the Civil Rights Division at that time, and he made a one-sentence speech. He looked over where Bob was sitting and he said, "Bob, you brought out the best in all of us, and we thank you." And then he walked on off and sat down, and nobody clapped or anything. The guy sitting next to him, he said, "You know that Marshall is a strained duck, isn't he? What's that supposed to mean?" And I've been thinking about it. And that's it. That is the highest art and indeed the greatest power of leadership. is to bring out the best in people, because the job is much too big to think that Galahad is going to roll up his sleeves and shine his armor and do it all. And leadership can appeal to the worst, or it can bring out the best. And I would like to suggest and perhaps show some of the ways in which I believe Richard Nixon appeals to the worst in us. And I think that's the greatest failure of leadership. Now look at the war in Indochina. He says he seeks peace, doesn't he? George McGovern says he seeks peace. You remember this story that Ed Muskie was telling back about a year ago about time he was driving down toward Portland, Maine, and he came to a fork in the road, and the sign to the left said Portland and the sign to the right said Portland. There's an old Maine farmer standing nearby the forks in the road, and he yelled over to him, said, "Say, I see the fork to the left says Portland and the fork to the right says Portland. I'm trying to get to Portland. Does it make any difference which road you take?" And he reports that the farmer looked up at the road signs and observed that the sign to the left said Portland and the sign to the right said Portland. He said, "Now what was your question?" He said, "The question is, does it make any difference which road you take?" And the farmer said, "Well, not to me it don't." Well, let me tell you, it makes a difference which road you take, America. The road to peace, if that's what it would be that Richard Nixon seeks, is based upon violence and the threat of violence. Look at your New York Times today, and you'll see that the second heaviest day of bombing in the history of the war was yesterday. And this is the same time that this fellow named Metternich or Kissinger or whatever it is supposed to be scurrying all over the world. With the fate of humanity in his vest pocket, trying to make peace. Peace how? Peace by violence and the threat of violence. And if we haven't learned anything from history, we ought to learn that doesn't work. Look where we are. And a ceasefire based on it, and God knows I hope we have one at this moment, it can't be too soon, is not a lasting ceasefire or a lasting peace, because you cannot hope to manage and control and force the teeming millions and billions of people on this planet to do what you want them to by violence. It cannot prevail. And George McGovern's peace is a peace that's based upon compassion, upon a belief in the individual. Look at the bombing of North Vietnam. First, you're not supposed to talk about it at all, you know. We don't want to know the truth of it. But who's doing it? We're doing it, and I believe that people are responsible for the results and consequences of their acts, and we are the ones that are doing that bombing. And we can stop it any day we want to, any moment we want to. And what's the bombing do? Well, it kills people, that's what it does, and we've known since at least the mid-65, 66 period, that it cannot in any way significantly reduce the capacity of North Vietnam to wage war if it chooses to. All it can do is kill women and children, because that's virtually all that's up there when you get right down to it. Even the last leak from CIA and DI, Defense Intelligence Agency, tells us there's not one division of troops left in the North. So what are we doing? We're punishing little people. I say little people advisedly. I felt like a freak over there. The average mature male Vietnamese weighs 112 pounds according to the World Health Organization. We're punishing them. We're playing God in their lives with bombers, multi-million-dollar machines piloted by college graduates, 30,000 feet in the air, punching buttons that wipe out little villages. Sure, we're hitting schools and hospitals and dikes and churches, because that's what's down there. And the Department of Defense doesn't want to tell us about it, but finally, after months of wrangling, It concedes, well, maybe we make a few mistakes. Whoops, there goes another 75 souls. When I got back, I drafted a letter to Secretary Laird. I said, I'm going to list bomb damage that I saw, and I will describe what I saw. And I listed hospitals destroyed and damaged. I listed schools destroyed and damaged. I located them geographically on the map. Same with churches and villages, little villages that had existed for centuries, millenniums, wiped out one night at 3 a.m. without warning by carpet bombing of B-52s. I listed housing areas, dikes, water control facilities. I described the damage, and then I passed on what I was told as to when and how it happened. 08/25, July 17, bombers came in and destroyed this hospital. I said, I wasn't there. I don't know. But Mr. Secretary, I think maybe you do. You say we bomb military targets. I say there's not a military target of significance in the whole North. But let's see you tell us what you really bombed. You've got aerial reconnaissance, you've got photography. Show us the pictures, the day before, the day of, and the day after. And let's see what you were trying to hit. Senator Ted Kennedy passes the letter on to the Secretary and sets dates for answers in public hearings twice, and nobody shows up. And the third time they show up and say, you know, there's some military security problems involved here. Let us tell you in confidence in executive session. And they go in there and they say, well, yeah, we probably miss once in a while, but we really can't tell you about civilian targets that we hit. You see, we don't keep any pictures or records of them because it has no military significance or value. Come on, America, we know. We know that we are bombing because we can with impunity, that B-52s aren't getting shot down, that they're just guys, the most advantaged among us, piloting those big things and raining death and destruction down there because the people who live there aren't doing what we want them to do. And I don't think we can do that much longer. I think if we have leadership that appeals to violence and the capacity for violence and the power of violence, that we will continue our violent ways and we'll destroy ourselves and destroy the others on this planet, their bodies and our souls, and perhaps ultimately all of us. Let's look at what we call crime, the phenomenon of antisocial conduct. In my judgment, Richard Nixon's solution to the crime problem is an appeal to the fear of the American people. Abandon freedom, he says. There's a contest between freedom and safety. Give up your freedom in the name of safety. Wiretap, preventively detain, mass arrest, put minimum periods of detention, mandatory minimum sentences on certain offenses, in the face of the manifest fact that prisons manufacture crime, that we beat the last drop of pity out of some and they come out pretty mean, that if you had no concern in your life except your personal safety, you didn't care a fig for anyone else or freedom itself, that you ought to do something about prisons because they are diminishing your safety. An appeal to fear. That's it. Make America afraid of freedom. Human nature is not to be trusted. Let's give up this little bit of liberty we have. Let's intimidate the press. Let's surveil the dissidents. And finally, we don't make keen distinctions. Maybe that Democratic National Party is not to be trusted either. Maybe it comes under the heading of bad guys in our listing. And let's put the bug on them. I do not know whether Richard Nixon knew that there was wiretapping and bugging of the Democratic National Committee. I do not know whether he ordered it. But I can tell you one thing with a certainty. It reflects his moral standard. He's been supporting that sort of activity from the word one. And I don't think there was ever an expression that was greater understatement than Brandeis's observation that wiretapping is a dirty business. Listen, wiretapping is tinkering with the foundations of individual integrity. Who are you going to believe in? You can't believe in your government. They're going to wiretap you. They don't trust you. You've got to give your complete faith and confidence to them and let them do what they will. How much longer do we think we can go on like that? ITT roaming the halls of the Department of Justice. Look at the solution to the problem of racism in America that's being proposed. I think the noblest quest of my generation was the quest for equal justice. I think a lot of Americans for once really believed in something. We read that part of the old documents that said equality, and we said, yeah, and we want it now. And there was singing from Selma to Montgomery. There was faith. There were people that had a dream that thought they could overcome. Well, I think we have an administration now that appeals to racism. I'll tell you in my judgment, the use of the word busing is nothing but keep them in their place. Let's not kid ourselves about busing. We've been busing for 6 decades in this country. It was a glorious thing when it began. It was the only way kids out in the country were going to get to school. White America stood by during those decades and watched black school children in the South bus 40, 50 miles past 3, 4 white schools and never said boo. Isn't that grand? Those kids are going to get an education. Aren't we doing fine? Not 5% of all the busing that goes on today achieves a higher level of integration. Probably 3 times that achieves a higher level of segregation. The question isn't whether we bus or not. We have to bus. There's no way that millions of kids are going to get to school except on busing. The question is, which way do we bus and what's at the end of the line? Now, listen to this cheap talk about quality education. First tell me what it is. You know, who knows? I'll tell you this, it's an appeal to separate but equal. That's what it is. And there is no equality in separation. Ignorance is the mother of prejudice, and segregation as a problem solver is one of the greatest failures in American history. How many problems have we tried to solve by segregation? Well, we met the Indians, and when violence didn't work, we tried to shoot them and hit them on the head. We had to segregate them into the reservations, didn't we? And who are the most deprived people in America today but the reservation Indian? Life expectancy 20 years less than yours and mine. Educational levels the lowest in the country. Segregation doesn't work. Look at the starkest form of segregation we've tried, prisons, the greatest failure of institutions in our society. And look at the starkest form of segregation within prisons, solitary. And look at the men who come out of solitary and measure their capacity for antisocial conduct, and it is considerably higher than the day we went in. No, we have to recognize the common humanity of all of our people or we'll destroy ourselves. And when I say all of our people, I mean the people of North Vietnam. I mean the prisoners at Attica. I mean George Jackson, all of us. The meaning of Richard Nixon's bombing in Indochina is first that we do not concede the common humanity of those people. It doesn't matter if we've got a kill ratio 500 to 1, that's glorious. Well, it's a glorious way to destroy your soul, America. And the second lesson of Richard Nixon's bombing in the North, and he has now dropped more bombs than any man in history, this man of peace. How can a man of peace be the man who dropped more bombs than any man in history? What kind of schizophrenia does it take? 7 or 8 Hiroshimas a month on a land smaller than the state of California. How would you like to have 7 or 8 Hiroshimas a month around here? That's what we're doing on an undeveloped country, a very poor country, just killing people. The second lesson of that bombing, of course, is we'll use technology against life. Get our boys out and put them on the carriers and put them on the airstrips in Thailand and Guam and places like that. Let them fly in safety miles above the little people and drop bombs that the best minds and major resources of this country have designed to efficiently, effectively destroy life. Well, the people that will use technology against life at this time in history, when science is doubling our knowledge of the physical world in 7 or 8 years, have found the secret to the destruction of the planet. Technology does not make moral judgments. Man is going to have to make moral judgments and apply them very effectively and sensitively to technology, or that which could be the liberator from want will be the destroyer of life. And we have to renounce the use of technology against life and revere life, or we'll destroy ourselves, and we need leadership that will appeal to that. Take your propositions here in California and look what you're doing. Number 17, we want to kill again. We don't even care about the supreme law of the land. The Constitution of the United States is interpreted by the Supreme Court. We want to kill those people. What will life be worth when the state itself takes life as the only means it can find, this wealthy, powerful land, to protect itself from those it fears and despises the most? That's an appeal to prejudice. Look at 21, Proposition 21 on busing. It say, turn your back, repudiate the golden quest, the dream of equality and integration in America. That's what it says. Look at 22, it says, keep poverty down. We need those people to pick our grapes and our lettuce, and we don't want to pay them for it. And we don't want them to be able to tell us about it by boycotts and such things. We want to keep them in their place. An appeal to prejudice, to the worst in us, when we desperately need people who will bring out the best in us. No, if we have a new racism in America, with racism still deeply ingrained in our spirit, if we don't show that we understand that it's not algebra and chemistry and political science that are the lessons we must learn, that we're going to have to bus and do a lot of other things to learn the great lesson of this day, and that is simply to live together. And if it takes buses, we'll do it, and we'll sing all the way to school. And the buses will run 2 ways, not 1 way, and the ways will be together. To integrate, to realize finally that the richness of this society is the diversity and differences of its people. That the only thing worthwhile is to be able to live together with dignity and respect and love. We desperately need people who will appeal to the best in us. You've got some chances here. There's a young woman of idealism. I believe in idealism. Look at all the talk we have about freedom and equality and justice, and then look at what we do. Kathy O'Neill can be state senator here. And if she is, it'll make an enormous difference in your lives. She can't do it by herself, but she will appeal to the best in you. There's a young guy around here. He's a lawyer who cares. He reads the Constitution and is old-fashioned enough to believe it means what it says. He recognizes its spirit. He thinks the spirit of the Bill of Rights is the spirit of humanity. He thinks the First Amendment says, look, we want a guy to be able to think, to breathe, to do his thing, to talk to others, to speak, to publish, to pray to his God as he sees fit. We don't believe you can coerce people away from that. He's not afraid in the face of a profession that has done everything it can to ostracize the lawyers who had the guts to defend the Chicago 7. He's not afraid to put his name on that brief that says the contempt convictions there are insupportable under any theory of law or justice. And his name is Roger Diamond, and he can go to the assembly from here. And he can bring out the best in you. And then there's the son of the minister from the plains, the country written about by the sensitive Norwegian, described in Giants in the Earth, Per Hansa and all of those. The minister's son, who flew the B-25s and know what it means to bomb, who started long ago saying this war is wrong, who's challenged daily for his consistency on the war. Mind-boggling, isn't it? How can anyone dare to challenge George McGovern's consistency on the war? Look at Richard Nixon's. How can people speaking on his behalf, what did he say in 1954, when the French get out, we get in? What did he say in 64, I'm with Barry, bomb 'em? What did he say in 68? I've got a plan. He had a lot of plans, didn't he? Look what he did to civil rights. He destroyed it. Purposely. He had a plan there, you remember. He said jobs are the solution to all of this. Now there's a way to get jobs for blacks. It's not the way these other fellows have tried. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission shouldn't have cease and desist powers. We shouldn't be filing all these Title VII cases. They just upset labor unions and people like that. No, you need a plan. I've got a plan. It's named after the city of brotherly love, the Philadelphia Plan. That's it. What do? You set quotas. Yeah. Follow my plan and you'll have economic power in the minorities and finally the chance to live together. Well, you read the plan and it doesn't quite say what he says it said. You follow its implementation in 69 and 70 and 71 and you see nothing happen. And then in 1972 you hear the man who had a plan say quotas are un-American. You can't use them. I think he's trying to take us in. Is that an exaggeration? What's the peace plan? The peace plan is to bomb. That's what the peace plan is. Look how upset we get when we hit that French legation. I don't like seeing the French legation hit. I had lunch there and I visited with Mr. Susini, who was injured to some degree. I don't know how seriously. It's a great big mansion. They serve meals just like you were in Paris. There are 20 French people living there. The estate has several acres of carefully cultivated grass and bushes and things like that, flowers. There's a tennis court. You bomb a school and kill 35 kids and you never know about it, America. But you hit the French legation there and you're afraid you may have caused an international incident and you're afraid that you might have hurt somebody with white skin, and it gets on the front page of the papers all over the country. We can do better than that. We're going to have to do better than that. If we don't cherish the lives of the children of Vietnam as the lives of the children of our own, why, they won't cherish our children as their own. And we'll go on with this combat that we've been in from the beginning of violence and war and fear and greed, and we'll not come out of it. And when a man of peace comes and says we will stop the bombing immediately, we will withdraw the presence of violence and the threat of violence, and we will try to give those people a chance to live their lives again, you can hardly hear him. But you've got to hear him. And you've got to pick up the song. We've got to be as good as they are. You got to wonder whether human nature can stand affluence. Can you pull up your socks, America, and wipe your nose and do something right? There's a saying in North Vietnam now. They love sayings as they love poetry and music. And number one on their hit parade is this: we shall overcome the thunder of the bombs with our singing. And that's what they're going to do, and that's what we must do. You know, flake off our lethargy and our frustration and our selfishness and get to work. Shaw told us something about what we need to do through Superman, Jack Tanner and his Man in Superman. He said, this is the true joy of life, the being deeply involved in a cause you yourself deem mighty, the being thoroughly worn out before you're thrown on the scrap heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Well, America, when you crawl into bed tonight and pull the sheets up over your head and count all your miseries, remember the children in the bomb shelters of Vietnam, and get out of bed and stand for freedom and equality and justice and renounce violence and segregation and fear and greed. We're the luckiest people that ever lived. We, above all others, have the capacity to solve the problems of our own in this world many times over, if we have the will, and if we will work with men like George McGovern, who can release the energies of this nation, who can make us believe in ourselves, who can bring out the best in us, we can overcome. Do your part, will you?
Is this going? Yeah. A young lady came to my door the other night and asked if she said she was from the county registrar's office and asked if I'd registered to vote yet. And I said yes. She said, there's another question I'd like to ask you. Are you planning to vote for Mr. Nixon? And so I asked her why she was asking me that question if she was from the county registrar of voters office. And she said that her superior had instructed her to ask all the people whether they were planning to vote for Mr. Nixon. I was wondering, do you think we can count on a fair count in the election this November?
Well, I think if we watch, we can. And I think we can watch. We've practiced exclusionary democracy in this country that speaks of democracy, you know. We had 47 million Americans 21 years of age and older who did not vote in 1968. Had they voted, rather than a valiant 13 in the black congressional caucus, we'd probably have 35 or 40, literally. There is power. It's not like Stokely Carmichael suggested that should be placed in the people. It is in the people. All they've got to do is exercise it. If you look at the 47 million who did not vote in 1968, you'll find that those poor people didn't vote. Incomes of 3,000 voted less than and less voted less than 40%. Incomes of 15,000 voted better than 85%. The uneducated didn't vote. Sixth grade education voted less than 50%. College graduates better than 87%. The blacks didn't vote, 17% less than their proper proportion if they turned out the same as whites and others. Other minorities, Chicanos didn't vote. Women didn't vote. If we really want to solve the problems of this society, we've got to have the people with the problems uppermost in our minds. We've got to have them most energetically involved. We've got to know about the problems. If we can get out there and really turn them out, and you can make that difference, George McGovern will win overwhelmingly. And with him we'll have dozens and scores of U.S. senators and Congress people who are women and who are black and who are Chicano and who know the problems of the poor and deprived in America, and we can get this place moving in time.
You was in Johnson's cabinet. Who was the first who ordered the bombing? And what Johnson says about the voice of America when he was candidate for president?
Could you all hear that question? I was in the Johnson cabinet. Who was the first to order the bombing? That's it in shorthand, I guess. President Johnson did plenty of bombing. We know that.
Yeah.
He thought he was going to win a war by violence. That's the way America had tried to do in every generation of its history up to that time, and he was as wrong as a man can be. But he bombed with troops on the ground. He never sent the B-52s north of the 19th parallel. He stopped the bombing north of the 19th parallel altogether in March of '68, and he stopped it altogether north of DMZ in October of '68, and the basis was a final admission that there was no military purpose to be served, and the man of peace who is winding down the war, who has dropped more bombs than any man in history, yesterday caused more bombs to be dropped than any other day but one in the history of that war. And I don't think that we can go on failing to learn obvious lessons. Sure, we make mistakes. I'd hate to have to try and tell you all the mistakes that I've made, but the question is whether we got the courage to face them and to change and to do better and to want to change is an end in itself.
Could you sit down so that the people behind you could see him? I don't know if there are any more questions. Also, I was wondering, you mentioned 2 or 3 candidates, and there's one candidate you were speaking to, Mike Shapiro. It's like, except he didn't have he didn't push or he didn't say he was running. He's just really a good guy. He's running for in his 20th district. I think it's senator, state senator. Also, I'm not sure whether to find out good.
Mr. Clark, over the past year or so here at Jan's Steps, almost every time some speaker of some note, such as yourself, has spoken, we've always been conscious of the large number of news cameras and the media coverage of things considered of value to be heard by America, as I felt very strongly your speech was directed to America. The question enters my mind, where are the cameras today?
I don't know.
It's just a question for everybody. I don't know if you have any comment about media coverage of these.
Well, I have a comment that might be helpful. We don't want to know the truth about some things. I don't mean to say that I have the truth or even a significant part of it, but I do believe in a marketplace of ideas. I think from the most surprising places you can find the germ of inarticulate truth. I think we have to, more than cherish dissent, I think we have to seek to elevate it because I think it's the principal catalyst in the alchemy of truth. And take my trip to North Vietnam. Before I got back, the Vice President of the United States, Senator Barry Goldwater, former Attorney General John Mitchell, Clark McGregor of the Committee to Re-elect the President, Secretary of State William P. Rogers and others had said such things as contemptible, dupe, traitor perhaps. They tell me that. I've never seen that in writing, but someone apparently has said something like that. And what's the purpose? They don't know what I've said. They haven't talked to me. They haven't seen whether the pupils of my eyes are dilated or there's something in the water I drank that's brainwashed me. They don't want you to listen. That's it. They don't want you to hear. They're afraid you might learn something that would be harmful, like we're killing women and children. I don't know why the media in here, maybe it's busy. Not a football game today, is there?
Mr. Clark, I would like to ask you to make some comments since you referred to one of the propositions on the California ballot for November 7th. Can you explain to me why so many people refuse to understand the proposition dealing with marijuana? As I understand it, it's simply a decriminalization. However, in trying to discuss it with many people, and especially from TV programs, they're trying to hide the fact, this particular fact, and claim that it is a stepping stones towards legalization. Thank you.
Thank you. The question's about Proposition 16, 19, I'm sorry, which shows you how much I know about it, I guess. I didn't have the number. And I don't know the specifics of it, but the question really was, why don't we face up to what the problem is? And the reason in large measure is fear. The fear of change. These are turbulent times, and we'd rather sit at home and soften our mind with alcohol and keep on like it is than face the truth of our society. This is beyond Auden's age of anxiety by a decade or so. We've approached literally the age of incoherence. And when you look at the way we address or fail to address the problem of marijuana, you wonder whether we have the capacity to solve problems. We're going to create 100 new dangerous drugs in institutions of higher learning like this, in the laboratories of the drug companies with public funds, 100 new dangerous drugs in the next 5 years that can cause mutations of genes and chromosomes, that can damage vital body tissue like brain tissue and other cells, and we're not even thinking about it. If we took a third the cost of a Polaris sub and put it in those labs, we could find the synthetic chemistry that will finally relieve the body of physical dependency on opium and its derivatives. But we don't spend any money. We stumble onto a methadone, which is maybe a halfway house, but halfway home won't do. We got to get people all the way home. And then we come to marijuana and we make a national issue out of it, in spite of our experience with prohibition of alcoholic beverages, which corrupted the integrity of the law so enormously. And beyond that, and most cruelly, we afflict a punishment upon thousands and thousands of young people that destroys the confidence of millions of young people in the integrity of our institutions and whether our purpose as a people is justice itself or mere force and control. And I think we have to face up that the evidence that we have at this time, and I think we got to keep looking because we don't really know what hurts us and what helps us. They taught me to eat spinach when I was a kid, and later on they said it caused stomach ulcers and other things, and I don't know. But I know that the evidence at this time as to the what marijuana does to you, it doesn't indicate that it's more harmful than many other things that we use in abundance. I don't recommend it. I'll tell you, I would like to see America go back to the day that we can so appreciate and enjoy our five senses, just plain old touching and smelling and hearing and seeing, that we can really love nature and ourselves again. But we're not going to do it by the legal sanction.
This fellow Mike Shapiro is also running against Alfonso Bell, who I understand has always voted for war appropriations.
Okay.
Mr. Clark, a lot of what you had to say today, I think, I don't know, it hit me as being very, very sincere. Back in 1964, when President Johnson asked Congress to give him powers under the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which brought about a lot of the problems we have today, you became a part of that administration back in 1965, and the brief that appeared in the Daily Bruin today said that you were one of the people that had brought charges against Dr. Benjamin Spock, yet you switched after you left the administration to defend Daniel Berrigan. I'm just questioning how sincere were you when you were with the Johnson administration, and why you didn't move then as a member of that administration, a member with power, to stop some of the problems.
Well, you will have to decide how sincere I am. I can't shed light on that, can I? I say I'm sincere, I say I'm insincere. You'll have to decide that. I joined the administration in 61, not 65, and I was there all those years. I don't represent Father Daniel Berrigan in litigation because he wasn't indicted in Harrisburg. I represented Father Philip Berrigan. I was responsible for the indictment of Dr. Benjamin Spock and Reverend William Sloane Coffin and Marcus Raskin and the others. I said at the time that I thought the law has to have integrity, that the prosecutor doesn't judge its morality, that their morality may be higher than mine, but if the forces of change are to have a hard place to push against, the law has to do its duty. I said at the time I didn't know who prosecuted Thoreau, didn't know the man's name, but I thought that he did his duty, that if he hadn't done his duty, we wouldn't know about Thoreau's stand as intimately as we do. If I had a criticism of the whole episode, it was that Thoreau let Emerson or his sister or whoever it was bail him out, because that wasn't the point. The point is that there are people that are prepared to put themselves on the line. My recommendation to Judge Ford was that there be no jail sentence in the Spock case, because I thought a jail sentence would be wrong. And I've said since then frequently that thank God I picked on people who could take care of themselves, and they did. And I've subsequently become, I think, close friends of Dr. Spock and very close to William Sloane Coffin and a couple of the others. And I just think that we can't choose up sides in this life and stay on one team all the time. We've got to see from day to day what we believe is right. I don't think it's a matter of a foolish consistency being the hobgoblin of little minds. I think Walt Whitman was right. Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I make my judgments from day to day, and I do what I think is right at that time and take the consequences.
Mr. Clark, since you did mention the local candidates of Roger Diamond and Kathy O'Neill, I was just wondering whether or not you forgot to mention Michael Shapiro's race for Congress, or if you just didn't endorse him or not.
No, I forgot to mention it.